And there have been circumstances where people who didn't do their due diligence properly signed a contract thinking they were purchasing a dispensary and a brand new license, that they were going to then pick up and move to another location only to be told by the state after the fact, you can't do that. You own this dispensary and you own it right here. It's not going anywhere.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cashing Out, brought to you each week by Hoban Law. With me today in the MJBulls studios is my legal advisor, Larry Mishkin from Mishkin Law and Hoban Law. Hi, Larry.
Hey, how are you doing?
We're doing great. Doing great. Dina's not with us today. Dina's not going to join us today. She's off on a family vacation, so we'll give her much needed rest. Since it's just the two of us, we can get into a little bit more legal stuff today. And one of the topics that we haven't got to yet, and that is due diligence, or what you do from the time you have a deal or a handshake to the time you get to the closing, all the information that needs to be passed between the parties. There's a lot of information, but it's so critical that it gets done right. And so I thought maybe that would be something we could tackle today if you're up for it.
Sure. Sounds good to me. I think to give the listeners just a little bit of context, even though most people probably know, and to some degree it speaks for itself, you said it accurately, Dan. Due diligence is an exchange of information, or even more to the point, it's making information available for the other party to come look at and investigate and learn about. And it's a very, very important part of any business deal. In the sale of a business, it's obviously a lot more convoluted, and it goes off in a number of different directions. But it serves a very, very important purpose, because there's only so much you as a potential purchaser can know about a target company before you actually shake hands and say, well, maybe we have a deal. So what due diligence is, it's kind of the in-between period, like you said, where an agreement is initially signed and before the agreement becomes final. There are a number of different types of due diligence, but far and away, the most important one is financial. If somebody's thinking about buying a company or buying part of a company, obviously, it's very, very important what the financial status of that company is. Because the person who's selling will always tell you that their company is doing well, or just something along those lines. So it's very, very important to see all of the financial information as much as you can get from the other side. Books, records, profit and loss statements, and tax returns, anything that's out there, because that's the buyer's way of really finding out what it is that they're contemplating buying. And so financial due diligence, really is at the top of the pyramid.
So probably next on that list would be if there's any pending litigation or any claims that they may have not disclosed up to this point.
And that's correct. And that's also very, very important. The last thing in the world you want to do is buy a company or buy into a company only to discover after the fact that you just bought into a lawsuit that was pending or that had been threatened. So a big part of due diligence is going out and not just finding the financial information about the company's overall performance and standing, where things are at. You're trying to avoid as much as possible buying into a problem, like going to buy a used car. And we all see those funny commercials now about a Carfax done by the little fox. But that's important. If you're going to go buy a car, new or used, you need to know as much information as you can about it. If it's used, was it ever in a car accident before? So same thing here. Nobody's going to want to come in and buy a business if some other party out there is suing the company or threatening to sue the company.
Okay.
They also want to look at the current performance of the company they're buying. How many customers do they have? What was their sales volume? How does that compare to where they were a year ago? So you're looking at their historical performance as well. And then the last part of that is, as much as possible, based on the information you have, to be able to anticipate where they're going forward. Have they signed some new contracts? Do they have some potential vendors or business partners out there that are reaching out to them to do business that if you buy the company, you'll have an opportunity to step into? And so those are all very, very important aspects of what is going on with the business. Now, given the fact that primarily on this show we're talking about cannabis-related matters, I think that these types of questions begin to bleed over into cannabis due diligence issues. So, for instance, if somebody wants to come in and buy a dispensary, the first thing that they need to know is what state are they in and what is the laws of that state with respect to whether or not licenses can be sold. Is it a saleable asset that you're looking at? assuming it is the person who I'm looking to purchase the license from, are they current with their regulatory compliance? Is their testing up to date? Have they passed site inspections? Do they have good quality control? And in the cannabis industry, given the very, very restrictive nature of the way businesses can operate, the more of this information you can discover up front, the better.
Yeah. It would not be good if you bought a dispensary only to find out that the license couldn't be transferred. That wouldn't go over well.
Well, it wouldn't. And in fact, that happens. And there have been circumstances where people who didn't do their due diligence properly signed a contract thinking they were purchasing a dispensary and a brand new license, that they were going to then pick up and move to another location only to be told by the state after the fact, you can't do that. You own this dispensary and you own it right here. It's not going anywhere. It is really, really important to look at that and make sure that you do have an understanding of it, especially given the fact that cannabis laws are changing so frequently these days. That's where it really becomes important, not only to first to know what the current law is and then to ensure compliance with your potential target.
Especially state to state. Just because a deal worked this way in one state probably doesn't work the same in another state when it comes to purchasing dispensaries or licenses.
You're absolutely right. Every state has different rules on what has to happen. In many states right now, licenses themselves are not transferable. So if I want to purchase a quote-unquote dispensary license, I have to actually purchase the business that owns the license. And then by being the new owner of the business, I step into the rights of the licensee. But that business cannot simply just sell to me its license.
Let me take a quick second and do a little business and thank one of our sponsors, Trevitt Hill LLC. Cannabis investors expect the companies that they invest in to generate really big returns. Unfortunately, not all companies reach their expectations. Trevitt Hill's management team works with investors to turn around and in some cases purchase their underperforming portfolio companies. To learn more, go to trevitthill.com. All right, so at the risk of getting too deep into the weeds here, in that situation, then you would have to do the purchase would have to be a stock purchase versus an asset purchase?
Correct. Well, yes, typically then in that case, right, it is the entity itself that is the license holder. So if you don't purchase all the stock and ownership of the full entity itself, then it may not work. And the state may come back in and say, no, all you're really just trying to do here is sidestep our rule against buying and selling licenses.
So then that rolls back into a couple episodes ago when we had Jim Marty, CPA, talking about the different tax ramification on a stock purchase versus an asset purchase. So all that comes into play.
The other side of it is that we have due diligence. And what due diligence is we're putting the burden on the purchaser to ask for the information, to do their homework. In other words, typically a contract will say from the date this contract is signed, the purchaser has 30, 45, 60 days within which to conduct their due diligence, raise issues, and terminate the contract if those issues cannot be properly resolved. So that's one way to do it. But nowadays, a lot of times people are also putting in mandatory disclosures. So they're shifting at least some of the burden back over to the seller. And they're saying to the seller, you must produce to us in advance all information, all of that type of stuff that would typically go into a due diligence situation, because sometimes the theory is that the buyer may not know what to ask for. So they can say, we need you to disclose to us anything that you know that's existing out there that would in any way damage the value of this business or potentially create problems for this business. You're far better off explaining the existence of a problem as opposed to letting somebody discover it and thinking you were trying to hide it from them.
I'd be a little bit nervous, though, if I were a seller and I agreed to providing this closure agreement that you just talked about, because it seems like I would just be accepting a lot of future liability. Like almost anything they could say, geez, you should have told me this.
Well, and that's really the truth. So, yeah, I mean, this is always a problem. The reason why we like due diligence is because we're saying to the other side, hey, you come in and you do all your homework. The burden's on you to get it done right. If they try to push the burden back onto me a little bit with mandatory disclosure, then what I tell sellers is make sure you document all of your disclosures. Today, I sent you over my financial books. Today, I sent you over this. Today, I sent you over that. Because that's what you're going to use in the future if they come back and say, well, we had no idea about this. Oh, yes, you did. I gave you this set of documents, and they were all this very issue was covered right in them. And that'll put a stop to their lawsuit pretty fast.
Yeah, I would just, like I said, I'd be uncomfortable as a seller signing a mandatory disclosure statement. And I mean, that just leaves you wide open for something down the road where they could say, you know, you never told us this. Like, I didn't think it was going to be an issue. Yeah.
Right. They have to prove that at the time you made or did not make the disclosure that you actually had knowledge of an issue that comes up later. So it's in other words, simply because I say I don't know of any issues and then an issue pops up, that doesn't necessarily make me as the seller liable for that. The bigger question is, are there specific things that arise that I should know about and that I can disclose and that I shouldn't?
Yeah. If anyone want to take my advice on this one, if I'm a seller of a cannabis business, I am not signing a mandatory disclosure.
And don't get me wrong, as a seller, I wouldn't voluntarily say to them, I will be happy to sign a mandatory disclosure statement. On the other hand, it's like any other type of business deal that you do. Who's got the leverage? If you've been trying to sell your business for a long, long time, and the right guy comes in with the money that you're looking for and the opportunity that makes the most sense to you, the only potential negative is if they asking for a mandatory disclosure. I might advise you, go ahead and make the damn disclosure because you've been trying to sell this business and now you've got somebody who's going to take it from you.
Yeah.
So,
good point.
You kind of have to balance that back and forth in terms of how much they can ask for and as opposed to what they're obligated to discover on their own.
That's a lot of information, but I think it's relevant to what we're doing right now with the sale of a business to talk about this in anticipation of what's going to be coming. And, we're prepared for it. For our listeners, if you have any questions or comments or ideas, please shoot us over an email at connect@MJBulls.com. That's connect@MJBulls.com. Any ideas that you have, please shoot us over an email. Quick thank you to Jamie Humiston for producing the music for the show. Thanks, Jamie. Larry, this has been good. I think
I agree.
Yeah, there's just so much to know when you're selling a business or buying a business. And, anytime you can even get a little refresher course like this, it only helps. So thanks again for being on the show.
My pleasure. Glad to help. And I look forward to talking to you down the road.
Yeah. To all of our listeners, you will hear us again next Sunday on Cashing Out.